Hey everybody, welcome to the continued CSS Noob to Ninja series. So we're going to get on part 5. And the topic for today, or at least for this lesson, is positioning. Positioning at first is pretty confusing. But then luckily, once you kind of figure out how it works, you don't even have to think about it. It really gets super simple. But there's different kinds of positioning: static, relative, fixed, absolute. What do all of these mean? Well, that's what I'm going to show you today. Let's go into TextMate, and I've created a new page called index.html in a folder called Part 5, and we're going to begin taking a look at parent-child relationships. Okay, so I'm going to create a div, and this is going to be our wrapper, but just for the example, I'm going to give it an ID of parent. Okay. Then within this div, let's create another div, and this one's going to be called child, just so it's easy to understand. Okay, and that's all we're going to do here. So we have a wrapping div and then a child div, and we're going to do the rest from Firefox. So let's copy that, and let's go into Firefox. I should have had this loaded. Give that just a moment. Okay. And let's go into the web developer toolbar like we've been using, and now we can begin styling. So because there's not any actual data within these divs, I'm going to hard code a width in. So I'm going to hard code a width of 600 pixels and a height of 400 pixels. And then, so you can see it, I'm going to set a background color. Okay, there you go. So now let's go into the child, and we're going to do the same thing. Let's give it a width of 150 pixels and a height of 150 and a background of red. Okay, so let's take a look at positioning and how it works. The first one, and maybe the easiest to understand, is relative positioning. So to set a positioning context, well, before we get there, let me show you. If you want to move, let's say we wanted this div to be 30 pixels to the left. We have left, top, bottom, and right properties. But if you're first getting started and you try to use them, they may not work how you think. Left, 30 pixels. You'll notice that nothing happens at all, and why? And it's because those properties will only work if you have a positioning context set. So let's go ahead and set that. Position, relative. And now it works. So what does relative positioning mean? It means when you set those left, top, bottom, right values, those values will be in relation to this element in its natural state on the page. So when you set left 30, you're saying push it from the left over to the right 30 pixels. Okay? If I were to set right, it would be pushed from the right towards the left 30 pixels. If I set top, it's going to go from the top, almost like guys pushing from the top, pushing it down. Okay, as you can see, you can combine these as much as you want. So if I want to do top 30 pixels and left 100 pixels, okay, that'll work just fine. Why don't we set top of like 500 and then left 20 pixels? You can see that these will overlap. So if I set it to 350, something like that, they're going to overlap, and that's fine. So that's really the gist of relative positioning. You take it in its current place in the document, and you can adjust its values. Okay? There's actually a couple more advantages, but I don't want to go too far into this. So now, let's set positioning to absolute. Okay, and now I'm going to set right 20 pixels. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Why? Well, actually it does, but at least for now, it seems to us that it doesn't make sense. So let's go back to relative. Okay, so here we're saying top 350 pixels. You know what? Why don't we just go ahead and bring that back down? Okay, so here we're saying from the right, go to the left 20 pixels. But if we change it to absolute, it doesn't really make any sense. It's kind of confusing, isn't it? Absolute positioning is based on the nearest positioned parent. So that's kind of a mouthful. So in this case, the parent of child we know is this div with an ID of parent, but we haven't set a positioning context like we did here. So it uses the window as its basis. So think of absolute more as like the broader canvas. So here we're saying from 10 pointed specifically at 10 pixels from the top, and you see it's 10 pixels from the top, and then the right edge 20 pixels away from the right edge, as you can see there. But watch what happens when we set a positioning context to its parent. Position, relative. It's going to push over. There you go. Because now you're saying go 20 pixels from the right of your nearest positioned parent. And now it's this div right here. So it uses this as the basis, whereas if we didn't have this, it would use the next parent element that was positioned, or the next one, or if there wasn't one, it'll use, as I said, the window. Now you'll see here, if I actually move the window, it's going to move with it. So you need to be careful about absolute positioning, especially when you're building layouts. They can be super powerful, but I know when I first got started, I leaned on them too much to make my job easier, and it can really ruin your layout. So you have to be smart. I would recommend first get used to using relative positioning, and then once you're smart enough and knowledgeable enough, you can take advantage of what absolute positioning is. So if I set position relative, and now I try it again, you'll see that it doesn't move. And it's because now we have more of a hard-coded position, because we have a fixed value here. If I did not have a fixed value, it would still move. And that's the same effect that we had with the window. And that's really the extent of it. So if we were to set a background, let's see what we can do here. Let's go into TextMate, and I'm going to go Style and just paste this in. And let's go back to Firefox, and you know what? Why don't we just grab a background? Let's go into NetTouch, and if I go click right around here and I click View Background Image, we can see the background image that NetTouch uses and a path. So it's a terrible practice to hot link to assets stored on somebody else's server. But since I'm with NetTouch and this will make things easier, I'm going to use it. But just know you shouldn't be doing this. If you do need to borrow it with somebody's permission, you can save the image to your desktop and then load it to your own server. That way somebody else isn't paying for your bandwidth. So let's go back, and I'm going to set body, the body element, and we're going to set a background with a URL linking to that file. And I'm going to set repeat. So let's come back to Firefox and reload. So this doesn't look good, right? Why is it? Well, first, because the background image is about this tall, and then you see it repeats again, and then it repeats again. So I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but if we want to say you don't want it to repeat Y, we can just say repeat X, and now it will not repeat. But you can see here at the bottom of the image is a different color than our background. So what you do in these cases is you, maybe with a program like Photoshop, you measure what that color is. And I believe, you know what, I updated to the latest version of Firefox, and it got rid of a bunch of my add-ons. But there is an add-on called Colorzilla, I believe. Why don't we go ahead and search for that right now? Firefox plugin, color, I think it's Colorzilla. Yeah, so what this is it's pretty much an eyedropper tool for your browser. So you can install it, and then I can click on it, and there will be a little button down here, and it'll tell you exactly what the hex value is. So I recommend you check that out. Anyhow, you would set the background of the body element equal to whatever that color was. That way it almost looks like a seamless transition. In this case, I don't have it, and I'm not going to take the time to figure that out. But let's go ahead and turn repeat back on, because I want to show you about static positioning. And what I also want to do here is get rid of the height. And let's come back and just paste in some gibberish text. So right here, something like that. And I'm just going to get it. This way we just have something to work with. Okay? Okay, so when we scroll, you see how the background scrolls as well? Watch what happens if I set, at the very top, background, we can set positioning of fixed, or I can do background attachment. And this is kind of the same idea as saying background positioning. And I'm going to set fixed. And now you can see, if I scroll, the background does not scroll with it. It is in a fixed position, hence the word fixed. So if we go up, so this is really helpful if maybe you have one big background image that you want to maintain in the view at all times. I can't think of any specific examples off the bat, but if you want the user to scroll and you don't want that beautiful background image to go away, you can set it as a fixed background positioning, and it's used the background attachment would be the property that you'd use. And that's really the extent of positioning. It just takes some time to figure out. You don't always rely on absolute positioning. Let's say in this case, let's just do a little bit more, because I want to make sure this is really a tricky topic when you're first getting started. And I'm going to go ahead and put that height back in. Height of 1,000 pixels. Okay, so let's say we have this div right here, and we want to push it all the way to the right. You have a couple options. Yes, you could do absolute positioning, or maybe better, you could do float it to the right. And now we can set a positioning of relative, and you get that same effect. But because it's not taken kind of out of the flow of the document, like when you set a position absolutely, other items will still be affected by it. So to give you an idea of what I mean by that, you see there, the paragraph, the box is affected by the text above. But if we were to go back and set position to absolute, it would not, because it kind of takes it out of the flow of the page. And it's almost like if you were to pick the element up literally and take it out of the flow and then put it back where you want. Well, that's what happens with absolute positioning. But with relative positioning, you're not taking it out of the page or out of the flow of the document. You're just kind of nudging it in one direction. So if I change that back to relative positioning, you can see the effect. And if I float it all the way to the right, and then you can kind of use a mixture of absolute positioning with floats, with margins, with the left, top, bottom, and right to begin forming your designs. And that is positioning in a nutshell.